the cold came first. Not pain, not fear. Cold, sliding under my skin while the service corridor lights flickered above me and somebody laughed nearby like my life was a private joke. Sofia Bellini was 24, a pastry chef in Brooklyn, and she had never belonged in rooms where men wore guns under tailored jackets and women smiled like knives. She came to the Salvatore Club with a simple plan: deliver the desserts, collect the money, get home before her brother started another fight with the world. Then Dante Salvatore stepped into her night. The city called him a king in a dark suit. The papers called him a businessman. Men lowered their voices when he passed, like sound itself owed him respect. I only knew one thing for certain. When I saw blood on his hand, I asked if he was hurt. When I saw what his mistress was doing, I sent one last text. Now my vision was folding in at the edges. His phone had already lit up somewhere beyond me, and the woman who saw my name on it laughed. The first thing I noticed about Dante Salvatore was not his face. It was the sound. A silver lighter, opening and closing with a clean double click in the middle of a kitchen gone silent. I had been piping vanilla cream into tiny cannoli shells when the room changed around me. Not loudly. Men like Dante did not need loud. 1 second the pastry station smelled like orange zest and hot sugar. The next it smelled like expensive wool coats, cold night air, and the particular stillness that came when armed men were pretending not to be armed. Eyes down, one of the dishwashers whispered. Too late. Mine were already up. He stood at the end of the stainless table like somebody had painted control into human form. Black suit. No tie. Dark hair pushed back from a face that looked patient, in the way locked doors looked patient. There was blood on one of his knuckles. Not much. Enough for me to see it. A terrified server was kneeling near the walk-in, crying so hard she hiccuped between breaths. 2 guards held a bartender against the wall. A dropped tray spun once on the tile, and lay still. Dante clicked the lighter shut. Ask again, he said. The bartender swallowed. I don't know who took the drive. Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You were the last one in my office. I was clearing glasses. And now my office is lighter by 1 ledger key and my evening is uglier than it was 10 minutes ago. One of the guards hit the bartender in the stomach. Quick. Efficient. Ugly. I should have looked away. Any sensible woman in Brooklyn with rent due and a younger brother waiting at home would have looked at her pastries and prayed to remain invisible. Instead, I looked at the blood on Dante's hand. It annoyed me instantly, the way my own attention annoyed me. Men were shaking. A girl was crying. I was standing inside the kind of room my mother used to warn me about, with a wooden spoon in her hand and a crucifix over the stove, and all I could think was that he was bleeding onto Italian marble. He turned then, slow as a tide, and his eyes landed on me. I forgot every useful sentence I had ever learned. You, he said. That was all. 1 word. Yet my body understood I had been selected for something. I set the piping bag down carefully because my hands were suddenly unreliable. I'm just the pastry delivery. I know who you are. That startled me more than it should have. You do? Sofia Bellini. Bellini Dolci. Your sfogliatelle are the only reason my uncle tolerates birthdays. Nobody in the kitchen moved. Even fear paused to listen. Dante stepped closer. Not rushed. Not theatrical. The blood on his knuckles came into sharper focus. Shattered glass, I thought. A slice, not a bullet. He stopped an arm's length away, and the cold from outside still clung to his coat. Did you see anyone leave the office corridor? He asked. My mouth opened, closed. I saw, not Bianca. I had seen Bianca Marchetti glide past the mirrored hall 20 minutes earlier in a silver dress that caught every light in the room. Everybody knew who she was. Dante's mistress, if newspapers and gossip sites were to be believed. She had smiled at me once the way beautiful women smiled at waitresses, without seeing a person there. I should have lied. Or said nothing. Or remembered that survival sometimes meant ignorance. Instead I said, before that, your hand. The room went so quiet I heard the refrigerator motors. Dante looked at me as if I had started speaking another language. What? That's your blood, isn't it? I pointed before I could stop myself. You should wrap it. Sugar and citrus sting like hell if they get in a cut. One of the guards made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a prayer. Dante glanced at his hand as though he had forgotten it existed. Then he looked back at me. You're advising me on first aid. Heat rushed into my face. No. I mean... Yes. I reached automatically for the clean towel at my station, realized what I was doing, and froze with it half lifted. The door was 3 steps behind me. I did not take them. His gaze dropped to the towel in my hand, then to my face. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes, so quick I might have imagined it. Come here, he said. Every instinct I owned said no. My feet went anyway. When I stood in front of him, he offered me his hand as if we were about to dance. Blood marked the side of his thumb, bright and startling against his skin. My fingers shook when I wrapped the towel around it. I was careful not to touch more of him than I had to. That would have been smart if he had not noticed everything. You're frightened, he said. Yes. Yet you still did it. I tied the towel. My voice came out smaller than I liked. It was bleeding. One corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. More dangerous than one. Little saint. The words touched the back of my neck. He withdrew his hand. Now answer me. Who was in the office corridor? My throat worked. Bianca Marchetti. She came out adjusting her bracelet. The room changed again. No one said her name aloud after that. Not until Dante dismissed half the staff, sent the bartender upstairs under guard, and kept me back alone while the kitchen exhaled around us in frightened little breaths. You understand, he said, taking my phone from beside the pastry boxes, that speaking carelessly can get you buried. I wasn't being careless. No? He unlocked my phone with a raised brow. Then what were you being? I should have told him he had no right to touch my things. Instead, I watched him type a number into my contacts under a single name, Dante. If you remember anything else, he said, handing the phone back, you text me. Not anyone else. Me. I took it. His fingers brushed mine. An accident. It felt nothing like one. By the time I finished plating the almond cake for the upstairs lounge, my pulse had almost settled. Almost. I told myself I would take the cash envelope, get the subway home, and pretend the whole night had happened to a different Sofia Bellini. Then I went to the orchid freezer for the sugar flowers. The service corridor was empty. Too empty. A man I had never seen before stepped out from the shadows near the stairs. Bianca stood behind him, one hand on the rail, silver dress gleaming like a blade. There she is, Bianca said softly. My spine went cold. You told him, she said. I backed up once. I don't know what you mean. The man moved closer. He smelled like cologne poured over gasoline. Bianca tilted her head. That's what I like about girls like you. Even terrified, you still try to be polite. I ran. I got 3 steps before something cracked against the side of my head and the corridor folded sideways. My shoulder slammed the wall. My phone spilled from my hand, skidding under a linen cart. The man cursed. Bianca told him not to bruise my face. Somehow I reached the phone. My vision blurred. My fingers slipped. I opened Dante's contact and typed with one thumb because the other hand wouldn't stop shaking. East Stairs. Bianca. Please. The last word nearly undid me. I hit send as footsteps closed in. Somewhere else in the building, Dante Salvatore's phone lit up. Bianca saw the screen before he did, and laughed. The service door locked from the outside. I woke to linen sheets, a ceiling painted with saints, and the ugly certainty that I had not died. The second certainty was worse. If I was alive, it was because Dante Salvatore had decided I should be. My head throbbed when I tried to sit up. The room swayed once, then settled into expensive silence, cream walls, dark carved furniture, one narrow crucifix over the door, and a window so tall it made me feel like a child. Somewhere beyond it, birds argued in clipped city hostel bursts. Not a hospital then, a private house. I slid a hand to the back of my skull. Bandage. Professional. My phone sat on the bedside table beside a glass of water and 2 white tablets. The door opened before I could decide whether escape was possible. A woman in her 50s came in carrying a tray with espresso and dry toast. She had silver at her temples, a navy dress buttoned to the throat, and the kind of face that suggested she had spent years managing disasters caused by men richer and louder than sense. "You're awake," she said. "Good. Drink before Carlo starts praying again." "Who's Carlo?" "Asking that already tells me your brain survived." She set the tray down. "I'm Mirella Costa. This house stands because I insist on it." I stared at her. "Where am I?" "At the Salvatore estate in Riverdale." The words hollowed out my chest. "My brother. Alive." My eyes burned with relief so sudden it embarrassed me. "Can I call him?" "In a minute. After the medicine." I took the tablets because refusing felt childish, and because my head hurt badly enough to make pride boring. The espresso was strong enough to put structure back into my bones. "What happened?" I asked. Mirella folded her hands. "You were found in a service corridor with a head wound and a very poor opinion of silver dresses, I imagine." The memory snapped back in pieces. Bianca. The man. My text. Dante's phone lighting somewhere too far away. My stomach turned. Did he get my message? Mirella's expression did not change. It only grew more careful. "You should ask him that yourself." Which meant no. The humiliation of it burned hotter than the pain in my skull. I had sent one last, frightened pleas to a man who had looked me in the face and told me to text him. And he had not come. A knock sounded. Then a man leaned into the room with a black duffel over one shoulder and a plastic meal container in his hand. He was broad-shouldered, handsome in a worn-in way, with kind brown eyes and a nose that had lost at least one argument. Is she conscious? Because I just thanked God over grilled chicken and I'd hate to retract it. "Come in, Carlo," Mirella said without warmth. He entered fully. "Miss Bellini." Carlo Greco. Transport, logistics, occasional emotional support animal for people who make bad decisions around this family. He lifted the meal container. "Also, this was my 11 o'clock meal, and your near murder pushed it to noon. I want that in the official record." Against all reason, a laugh escaped me. It hurt my head and was still worth it. Carlo brightened. "Excellent. She's got pulse and sarcasm." Mirella looked at him. "Leave. In a second." He lowered his voice to me as though sharing state secrets. "If the boss comes in with that face, don't panic. That's just his regular one, Carlo. I'm going." He stepped backward toward the door, paused, and glanced at Mirella. "If I die before my next meal, tell my mother I tried to eat clean. You'll outlive us all out of spite," Mirella said. He left grinning. The room felt warmer after him, which was probably the point. Mirella watched me wrap both hands around the espresso cup. "You should know something before Dante comes in. This house is safe. Safer than wherever the people who hit you expected you to wake." "People?" "Yes. Bianca. She is no longer in this house. That should have comforted me. It didn't." "And Dante?" I asked. "He has not slept." The words landed oddly. Before I could ask more, the door opened again. No warning. No dramatic pause. Dante simply entered and took the room with him. He had changed clothes. Same dark severity, different suit. Fresh shirt, no blood. The bandage on his right hand remained, neat white against his skin. When his gaze settled on me, something in my chest tightened so fast it felt like anger trying to become something else. Mirella left without being asked. Dante stood by the foot of the bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit in the head." "Good. Concussion patients who answer honestly worry me less." I set the cup down because I suddenly disliked my own unsteady hands. "Did you get my text?" His face did not move. No. The word was flat enough to be true. It still sliced. "Oh." I swallowed. "Then why am I here?" Because by the time I found the corridor, the cameras had conveniently died and Bianca Marchetti had developed a travel emergency. I looked at him. "You found me anyway." "Yes. How?" You bled on my floor. That should not have sounded intimate. It did. I touched the bandage at my head. So what now? Now you stay here until I know who moved against me and why they used you to do it. I have a bakery. You have a target on your back. My brother needs me. Your brother is downstairs yelling at Matteo because Matteo took his backpack apart looking for weapons. I almost got out of bed before the room tilted. Dante crossed the distance in 2 silent steps, one hand on my shoulder before I could fall. Everything inside me stopped. His grip was warm, controlled, heavy enough to steady, light enough to let go. He let go, at once. Restraint. So sharp I felt it. I said, "Stay down," he murmured. "You can't just keep me here." "I can." There was no threat in it, which made it feel worse. I looked up at him. "I texted you because I thought you meant what you said." A pause. I did. The silence after that was crowded. I wanted to ask why he had Bianca near his phone. I wanted to ask what she was to him. I wanted to ask whether I had imagined the shift in his face when I bandaged his hand in the kitchen. Instead I said, "Then your rules failed." His eyes darkened, not in anger, in recognition. "Yes," he said. The admission hit harder than a denial would have. He turned toward the door, then stopped. "Get dressed after you eat. Matteo will take you to see your brother. You do not leave a room in this house without a guard. You do not answer unknown numbers. And if you remember anything from last night, you tell me before anyone else." That sounds like prison. His gaze came back to mine. "No," he said quietly. "Prison is when no one comes." Then he left. The latch clicked with the kind of control that didn't need force to be final. Nico Bellini looked like he hadn't slept in a week and had spent all of those hours being offended. He pushed away from the library mantel the second Matteo let me in. Soft. I made it 3 steps before the room reminded me about the concussion. Nico caught my elbow, muttering a curse at Matteo, at Dante, at rich people in general. He was 19, too tall, too fast, with our mother's mouth and our father's terrible instinct for acting as though fear could be insulted into leaving. "You're okay?" he asked. "I'm alive." That wasn't the question. I wanted to hug him and shake him in equal measure. "I'm okay enough. Are you?" Somebody searched my underwear drawer in a guest room that costs more than our bakery oven. From the corner, Matteo Ricci said, "If it helps, I also found your rolling papers." Nico glared. Matteo, Dante's consigliere, did not look like the movies. No bulk, no flashy suit. He looked like a university lecturer who had made a bad and permanent decision about his profession. Quiet eyes, precise hands, a scar near his chin. "It doesn't help," Nico said. "It wasn't meant to." I sat because standing had become unreliable. The library smelled like leather, dust, and the low bitter ghost of espresso. Outside the tall windows, winter light lay thin over a stone terrace. "What happened at the bakery this morning?" I asked. Nico looked away first, which was answer enough to make my stomach go hard. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Matteo's expression stayed neutral. "Your brother had visitors. Nobody I know. 3 men in a black Audi with Queen's plates," Matteo said. "One asked whether Bellini Dolci always catered Salvatore events. Another asked whether Sofia worked alone." I went cold. Nico spread his hands. "I told them to get lost." "You also failed to mention," Matteo added, "that one of them called you by name." I turned to Nico. "Why would they know your name?" His jaw locked. "Brooklyn isn't that big." I knew that answer. It was the one men gave when truth was somewhere uglier behind it. "Did you borrow money again?" I asked. He laughed once without humor. "Nice. Nearly get murdered, and you still open with the family classic." "Nico." "No." Which meant yes, or something close enough to yes to taste like it. Before I could push, the library door opened and Carlo leaned in carrying a tray balanced with 6 tiny cups and a container of almonds. "Emergency coffee," he announced. "And before anyone starts shooting each other emotionally, these are portioned. I'm counting." "No one asked you," Matteo said. "That's how you know I care." Carlo set the tray down and pointed a warning finger at Nico. You kid, if you touch my smoked almonds, I will testify against you in church. Nico blinked. What? Carlo sighed like a weary patriarch. Children used to respect other people's macros. Even Matteo's mouth threatened movement. Carlo turned to me, lowering his voice. Morella made soup. This is how she shows tenderness. Don't tell her I said so. Then to Matteo, boss wants Sofia in the East kitchen in 20 minutes. Apparently the household has decided only pastry can restore morale. He left before anyone could refuse him. That was how I found myself, head still aching, standing in a kitchen larger than our entire bakery storefront while 3 women watched me unpack flour, eggs, and blood oranges from an order Matteo had somehow arranged in under an hour. Morella stood with arms folded. If you faint into the meringue, I'll have Carlo mop around you. I won't faint. Good. I tied on an apron and let my hands remember what the rest of me could not. Zest. Separate. Whisk. Fold. Torch. Sugar did not care who ran the city. Butter still required patience. Cream still turned if you bullied it. There was mercy in that. Morella watched me spin sugar into thin amber loops. You do that when you're thinking. Do what? Make beautiful things sharper than they need to be. I looked at the sugar. She wasn't wrong. By the time I plated the small cakes, dark chocolate base, rose cream center, a caramel shell so thin it would shatter under a spoon, the kitchen had relaxed around me. One of the younger maids asked for my recipe. Another wanted to know if the shell could be tinted gold. I almost answered like this was my ordinary life. Then Dante came in. Conversation didn't stop because people in his houses had learned how not to be obvious. But it bent, tilted, noticed him. His gaze moved from the plated desserts to my hands dusted with sugar. What is it? He asked. A pastry. That got me a look. Morella answered for me. She names them. I did not. Usually, but my mouth betrayed me. Woman in glass, Carlo, appearing in the doorway as if summoned by drama, put a hand over his heart. God help us. It's art. Dante's eyes stayed on the dessert. Why? I wiped my fingertips on a towel. Bitter chocolate under the sweetness. Soft middle. A shell that looks strong until the slightest pressure. Carlo stared at the tray. I knew dessert understood me. Morella smacked the back of his head lightly. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I became aware that Dante was not looking at the pastry anymore. He was looking at me like I had accidentally said something in a language he already spoke. You hide your nerves by talking, he said. Yes, and your feelings by baking. I forced a shrug. Cheaper than therapy. Carlo made a wounded sound. See? This is why I like her. Dante picked up one of the pastries. He did not eat it. He just held the plate, thoughtful. Matteo says your father kept old notebooks. The question sounded casual. It wasn't. My shoulders went stiff before I could stop them. Everyone's father kept notebooks. Not everyone's father disappeared owing money to half of Brooklyn. I set the towel down carefully. You investigated me. I protect what comes under my roof. I wanted to tell him I was not a thing. I also wanted to know how much he had learned. My father is gone, I said. That's all there is. A lie, maybe. Or only an incomplete truth. Paolo Bellini had vanished 6 years ago after telling my mother he was taking one last delivery to settle one last debt. Men came around after that. Not police. Worse. Men who smiled with all their teeth and asked about ledgers, recipes, routes. We never found him. We found his coat in the river. Dante set the pastry back on the tray. Someone is already moving again, he said. My men picked up one of Moretti's couriers near your bakery. Moretti. The name made the kitchen air feel thinner. Why would they care about us? I asked. That's what I intend to learn. He turned to go. Did Bianca leave because you sent her away? I asked before I could stop myself. Or because she ran. The kitchen forgot how to breathe. Dante did not answer immediately. Then, because she knew better than to stay. It wasn't enough. It was all he gave. When he left, the double click of his lighter sounded once from the hall. Later that night, while I lay awake in the guest room with sugar still under one thumbnail and fear lodged under my ribs, Dante stood alone in his office looking at the restored notification log on a private security tablet. East Stairs. Bianca. Please, time stamped 11 minutes before he found the blood. Bianca had deleted it from his phone. Sofia Bellini believed he had failed her. Dante let the knowledge settle where punishment usually lived. Then he ordered Bianca found alive. By the 4th day in Dante's house, I knew 3 things. First, the Salvatore estate made silence feel expensive. Second, Carlo Greco had 6 identical black meal prep containers and loved none of them as much as he loved complaining about them. Third, Dante Salvatore avoided being alone with me in ways that made being near him feel sharper, not safer. He was everywhere without lingering, at the breakfast table reading reports while I tried not to notice the line of his wrist beneath his cuff, in the courtyard speaking Italian to men who answered too fast, at the end of long hallways, phone in hand, looking like the whole world had already been weighed and found manageable. He never touched me unless he had to. That was becoming a problem. The storm broke just after dusk. Rain slammed the windows hard enough to rattle old glass, and the power dipped once, twice, then cut half the ground floor into darkness. Generators kicked in with a delayed groan. Morella swore at the electricians by name, though none of them were present. I was in the pantry looking for sea salt when the lights went completely out. Not dim. Gone. The dark landed like cloth over my face. I took one step backward and hit a shelf. Jars clinked. Somewhere in the house, men's voices sharpened. A second later, the pantry door opened and a hand closed around my wrist. I inhaled to scream. Quiet. Dante. The word brushed my ear, low and close. His other hand came to my mouth, not rough, just immediate. I nodded before he could feel the panic turn useless. He removed his hand at once. There are men in the west corridor, he murmured. My pulse kicked. Moretti? Maybe. The dark shifted with the sound of his lighter. Double click, flame bloomed between us, gold over his face, over the shelves lined with oil and vinegar, over the bandage that was finally gone from his hand. The little St. Michael engraved on the lighter flashed once. His gaze moved over me, checking, counting. That look did something dangerous to the center of me. Are you hurt? He asked. No. Stay behind me. We listened. Rain. Distant footsteps. A door opening somewhere too fast. Then a crack in the hall. Not thunder. A shot. I jerked. Dante caught the back of my neck instinctively, palm warm at the nape, holding me still while he listened. The contact lasted one breath too long. 2. Almost. Then he let go. Lock the pantry if I tell you, he said. You're leaving? If they got this far inside my house, yes. I'm not hiding in a pantry while people are shooting. His head turned toward me. Even in darkness, I felt the full weight of his disapproval. This is not democracy. Little Saint, the nickname should not have helped. It did. Another shot sounded, closer. A man shouted in Italian. Then Carlo's unmistakable voice rose over the chaos. If I die on leg day, I'm haunting all of you. I made a startled noise that might have been terror trying not to laugh. Dante's mouth nearly moved. Then the pantry door banged wider, and Matteo appeared, gun drawn, suit jacket open. False breach, he said. Perimeter boys fired on a drunk idiot climbing the rear wall. Dante did not relax. Neither did I. Matteo's eyes flicked between us in the lighter glow, taking in my wrist in Dante's grip, Dante's body blocking mine, the fact that neither of us was speaking. Carlo is conducting an emotional funeral for his lentils. Tell him to be quiet, Dante said. That has never worked. Matteo disappeared again. Dante shut the lighter. Darkness rushed back. For a moment, neither of us moved. I hate this house in storms, I admitted. Why? I almost said because it sounds too large to be safe. Instead, I said, because the doors are heavy enough to keep people out. And in? Yes. A pause. Then, when I was 26, my sister died in an elevator during a power cut. The words struck so hard I forgot the dark. Dante did not speak like men who wanted comfort. He said things the way other people set stones down. She texted me 3 times, he continued. I was in a meeting. I thought I'd answer when it was finished. The pantry seemed smaller, closer. I understood suddenly why he had gone so still the night I mentioned his phone, why his eyes had shuddered whenever the subject of messages or missed calls came near him. Not grief spoken aloud often. Grief worn down to metal by repetition inside the bones. I'm sorry, I whispered. He made a low sound I couldn't read. So am I. I wanted to touch him. That knowledge frightened me more than the shots had. The power snapped back with a fluorescent hum so abrupt we both blinked. Light poured over shelves, over my flour-smudged apron, over his face stripped bare for one impossible second before it closed again. My hand was halfway to his wrist. I dropped it. He saw. Of course he saw. There was a beat where either of us could have said something stupid enough to change the air permanently. Then Carlo staggered into the pantry holding his chest and one Tupperware container. I would like this household to acknowledge, he announced, that my emergency chickpeas have been traumatized. He stopped when he saw us. Intimate lighting. Sorry. It was dark, I said too fast. Carlo glanced at Dante, then at me, then at the lighter still in Dante's hand. Sure. And I eat almonds for the taste. Dante gave him a look that had ended men. Carlo sighed. Morella says if I keep dramatizing security incidents, she won't iron my shirts. She irons your shirts? I asked before I could stop myself. He straightened, deeply pleased. Twice a week, which, in Southern Italian widow language, is basically a sonnet. Even Dante surrendered the smallest exhale. When Carlo left, taking his chickpeas and his delusions with him, Dante turned back to me. Bianca deleted your message, he said. I stared. What? I restored the log. She saw your text. She removed it before I came back to the table. The room tilted in a new direction. So you didn't ignore me, no. The relief was so sharp it almost hurt. Right behind it came anger. Humiliation. The memory of Bianca's laugh. Why did she do it? Because she thought your life was cheap, he said. And because she was already working for Enzo Moretti. Fast mystery answered. A worse one opening beneath it. My throat tightened. What does Moretti want with me? Dante looked at me long enough to make the silence meaningful. That, he said, is what scares me. He left me with the pantry still smelling faintly of olive oil, rain, and the warmth of his hand on the back of my neck. I did not sleep. My father's handwriting looked harmless. That was the worst part. Blue ink, slanted numbers, flower fingerprints worked into the margins. On the outside, the notebook was what it had always been in our apartment kitchen. Old recipes, grocery tallies, a page where my mother had once written buy lemons 3 times because he kept forgetting. Inside the back cover, beneath a glued sheet of wax paper, there was a second ledger. I found it because Nico finally broke. Not beautifully, not nobly. The way people usually break, defensive first, then tired, then ashamed. You should have let me handle it, he said. We were in the small sitting room off the east kitchen while rainwater still threaded the windows from last night's storm. Matteo had cleared the guards to the hall. Dante stood near the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, saying nothing. His silence made honesty feel inevitable. Handle what? I asked, though I already knew. Nico rubbed both hands over his face. The bakery, the rent, the oven that keeps dying every Thursday like it's got a grudge against us. I took money to keep us open. My stomach dropped anyway. How much? He muttered it. I stared. Nico. He said it louder this time, and the number hit the room like something dropped from height. Matteo exhaled through his nose. Dante didn't move at all. You borrowed that from who? I asked. Alessio Gallo first. Then Gallo sold the debt. Nico's eyes flicked to Dante, then away. To people who work for Moretti. I stood so fast the armchair knocked the back of my knees. You took money from Moretti's people and thought maybe that was something to mention later? I thought I could pay it back. With what? He laughed once, brittle and embarrassed. That was sort of the flaw in the plan. I wanted to scream. Instead, I gripped the edge of the little table so hard my fingers hurt. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already look at me like I'm one bad decision away from turning into him. He didn't have to say our father's name. It arrived anyway. The room smelled suddenly of burnt coffee and old secrets. Matteo set a worn leather notebook on the table between us. One of my men recovered this from the false bottom of your office desk at the bakery. My breath caught. Dad's book. The same cracked green leather. The same coffee stain on the corner from the morning he left and never came back. I thought that was gone, I whispered. So did the men who tore apart your flower inventory, Matteo said. Dante spoke for the first time. Open it. I looked up at him. You ask like it belongs to you. No, he said. I ask like men are bleeding over it. Something in me wanted to refuse him simply because he made obedience sound inevitable. But the truth was worse than pride. He was right. I sat again and opened the notebook. Recipes. Lemon biscotti. Honey cake. Almond cream. Dad's sloppy notes in the margins. Buy vanilla. Fix mixer. Don't let Sophia over-whip. For one humiliating second my eyes blurred too badly to read. Then I saw the wax paper glued into the back cover. Not neatly. Dad had never been neat when he was frightened. My pulse changed. What? Dante asked. I slid a nail beneath the edge and peeled it back. Underneath was another page. Columns. Numbers. Initials. Dot codes disguised as oven temperatures and delivery times. 45 minutes at 3:20. 2 crates blood orange. Pier 8. Tuesdays. All of it written in the language of pastry, because pastry was the one thing nobody in our house had ever questioned. Oh my God, I said. Nico moved beside me. What is it? Not recipes. I traced the columns with a shaking fingertip. The quantities are wrong for baking, but right for shipments. Citrus names instead of surnames. Orange means Red Hook. Lemon means Hunts Point. My father had always color-coded fruit in his wholesale orders. These are roots. Matteo leaned in, interest sharpening his usually still face. You can read this? I grew up reading his grocery lists like treasure maps. I turned pages faster. This one, 7 vanilla, 1 clove, midnight. No, that's not clove, that's C. My heart began to pound. Container. He hid container numbers and ingredient initials. Dante came to stand behind my chair. I felt him there before his shadow touched the page. Cold night air still lived faintly in his coat. Under it was that quieter scent I had started to know. Cedar, smoke, something iron cold and expensive and tired. My body understood his nearness before my mind approved of it. You're certain? He asked. Yes. How? I looked up at him, because my father always rounded measurements when he lied. For the first time, something like surprise moved across Dante's face without immediately vanishing. He glanced at Matteo. Photograph. Every page. Cross-check the coded routes with Moretti's port entries from the last 3 years. Matteo took out his phone. Nico looked sick. So Dad was working for Moretti? No, I said automatically. But I didn't know that. Not really. The uncertainty cut deeper because I had spent years defending a ghost. Matteo photographed while I translated. Butter meant cash. Saffron meant weapons. Sugar meant girls. When I spoke that last one, the room went still. Dante's voice changed by a degree I would have missed if I had not been listening for him all week. Say it again. I swallowed. Sugar means girls. Nobody moved. The notebook trembled slightly in my hands. I set it down before Dante could see. My father had not hidden tax fraud. He had hidden routes for women. Trafficking, maybe. Movement. Sale. My skin crawled. He found something he couldn't live with, I whispered. Dante's gaze stayed on the page. Or something he planned to sell. I flinched before I could stop myself. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Truth doesn't bruise less because you love the dead, he said. Anger surged fast enough to feel useful. And suspicion doesn't become wisdom just because you say it in that voice. Matteo's mouth twitched like he was suppressing something dangerous to his health. Dante looked at me for a long beat. Then, very softly, "Good." I frowned. "What?" "You should be angry." The fight leaked out of me at once, leaving only exhaustion. I rubbed my eyes with the heels of my hands. Carlo appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with sandwiches cut into precise triangles and a boiled egg balanced on a napkin like a moral lesson. "I brought emergency protein," he declared. "If anyone dies decoding pastry espionage on an empty stomach, I refuse responsibility." He stopped when he saw the pages spread out. "Oh," he said, "this is worse than debt. It was always worse than debt," Matteo murmured. Carlo put the tray down carefully. His usual comedy didn't disappear, it just folded itself smaller. "Morella says Sofia needs food if she's going to save all of us with flour-based intelligence." "I'm not saving all of you," I said. Carlo handed me a sandwich. "You're already doing an upsetting amount." I took it because my hands needed something normal to do. Dante picked up the notebook himself this time. His thumb paused over a line halfway down the last hidden page. One word. "Lucia." My breath caught. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he turned the book so I could see. A shipment notation. Sugar. Service elevator schematics. Midtown Hotel. The date made something inside his face go empty. "The night my sister died," he said. No one breathed. My father had written her name in the margin and underlined it twice. Not a route then. A warning. Slow mystery opening wider. Before I could speak, Matteo's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and whatever he saw sharpened his whole body. "The bakery alarm just went off," he said. "Back entrance." Nico went white. I locked up. Dante shut the notebook. "Someone knows we found it." Matteo's gaze moved over the room. "And they knew exactly where to look. Nobody said traitor. We all heard it anyway. The bakery smelled wrong when we arrived. Not of butter and orange peel and the faint old vanilla that lived in the walls no matter how often we scrubbed. This was metal, cold air, and the ugly sharpness of a door opened by strangers. Dante made me stay in the SUV until his men cleared the front. I got out anyway. By the time he turned, I was already on the sidewalk in my wool coat, notebook pressed under one arm, rain blowing hard enough to sting my cheeks. "I told you to wait in the car. And I told you it's my bakery." His jaw shifted once. Not anger. Calculation. He took in the wet street, the dark windows, the fact that I had followed him into danger and would probably do it again. Then he opened the back of his coat just enough for me to stand in the shelter of it while we crossed to the door. Almost. The shop lights were dead. The display case had been smashed. Glass glittered under the emergency beam of Matteo's flashlight. Flour ghosted the floor in white drifts where sacks had been cut open. It looked like violence pretending to be snow. Nico swore under his breath behind us. Dante put one hand out without looking back, stopping him in place. "Stay there." The command landed. Even Nico obeyed it. I moved deeper into the kitchen, heart pounding. The old wooden recipe shelf had been ripped off the wall. Cupboards gaped open. Someone had overturned the mixer my mother bought secondhand when I was 13 and had cried over in the stockroom because owning it made the bakery feel real. "They were looking for papers," I said. "Or for you," Matteo replied. I swallowed. Then I saw the back office door ajar. My stomach turned cold. I stepped toward it at the same moment Dante did. We reached the threshold together. Inside, my desk had been split open. The blue cash tin Nico and I kept beneath the invoices sat empty on the floor. Someone had spray-painted one word across the far wall in black. Saint. I stopped breathing. Dante's hand came to the middle of my back, steady and hot through my coat. "Out," he said. I didn't move. The room seemed to tilt around the word. Not little saint. Just saint. A message to him, maybe. Or to me. Or both. "Out, Sofia." The use of my name made it worse. I turned. That was when the first shot blew out the front window. Everything after that happened too fast for clean memory. Matteo shouting, Nico dropping, glass exploding inward. Dante's arm around my waist hard enough to bruise as he dragged me behind the steel prep table. Another shot. Then another. Men moving outside, boots on wet pavement. Carlo, somewhere near the back, yelling, "This is why I hate cardio." Dante shoved a gun into Matteo's free hand and looked at me once. "When I move, you go through the rear freezer and do not stop. I'm not leaving you." His gaze hit mine full. "You are not the one they came to kill." Before I could answer, he rose and fired twice through the shattered front. Efficient. Horribly calm. I had never seen violence from this close when it belonged to him. No wasted motion. No shouting. No swagger. He moved like the act had been decided long before the gun came up. More disturbing than rage. He pushed Nico toward the rear hall. Matteo covered. Dante stayed between the windows and me, taking the angle where the bullets would come. Choosing it. The choice landed harder than the gunfire. I ran when he told me to. Not well. The freezer tiles were slick. Cold air punched my lungs. We cut through the storage corridor and out the alley door into rain thick as thrown gravel. One of Dante's men opened the armored car. Then Dante jerked. Just once. I saw it because I was looking at him, and because I had started to know the shape of his control too well. His left shoulder snapped back half an inch. Dark spread beneath his coat. "No." He turned on me with that same unbearable calm. "Get in the car, you're bleeding." Little saint. The words should have been a warning. They came out strained instead. I caught his sleeve before I could stop myself. No. That was it. That was the thing again. The one that made something in him go raw and silent. Bullets cracked at the alley mouth. Matteo shoved Nico into the car. Dante wrapped one arm around me and bodily put me inside, then climbed in after, slamming the door as the driver tore away. For 10 minutes, no one spoke over the engine in the rain. Blood soaked through Dante's shirt at the shoulder seam. Not pumping. Not arterial. Still enough to make my own breathing ragged. "Take off the coat," I said. He looked at me like I was deranged. Dante, he held my gaze for one beat, then shrugged out of the wet wool because apparently being shot had not improved his habit of terrifying me. The bullet had grazed deep along the top of his shoulder. Ugly, but clean enough to bandage before stitches. I ripped open the emergency kit with hands that almost worked. Nico stared. Matteo watched me with quiet, unreadable attention. I pressed gauze down. Dante didn't flinch. "Does anything make you react?" I muttered. "Yes." I looked up. He was already looking at me. Almost. The car pulled under a stone arch a few minutes later. Not the estate. A small private chapel attached to an older Salvatore property upstate. Candlelight glowed behind red glass. Rain tracked down the saints in the windows. Matteo took Nico to the side rooms. Dante refused the house medic until I finished wrapping the bandage, because apparently both of us had reached a point where stubbornness was easier than naming what anything meant. The chapel was empty except for us and the smell of wax. I tied the cloth under his arm carefully. "You need stitches. I've had worse." "That is not comforting." "No, it isn't." His voice sounded tired for the first time. I lowered my hands. He was too close. Or I was too aware. The candles made his face look older at the edges, younger at the mouth, more breakable. Which was ridiculous. Men like Dante weren't breakable. They were the reason other things broke. Yet. He lifted his uninjured hand and touched one sugar grain still stuck near my wrist from the bakery counter. His thumb swept it away. A spark went through me so abruptly I forgot language. He dropped his hand first. Restraint. Again. In the silence, his thoughts moved like a sealed knife behind his eyes. If he had given them words, they would have sounded like this. He could have wanted any beautiful, frightened woman less than he wanted Sofia Bellini. That was the problem. She had reached for his blood before the door in a room full of armed men. She had done it again in the alley. No one in his life had ever looked at his wound before counting the exits. That was why her. That was why it kept feeling less like danger and more like ruin. I said the first true thing I could survive saying. "If you stop now, I don't know if I'll be brave again." His eyes closed once, When he kissed me, it was not hungry first. It was careful enough to hurt. His mouth touched mine like he was asking a question he hated needing answered. Warm. Measured. Shaking me apart anyway. I made a sound that embarrassed me instantly and moved closer before I understood I was doing it. He stopped. Forehead to mine, breath unsteady for the first time since I had known him. Not like this, he said. I should have been relieved. Instead, I wanted to cry. Then Matteo opened the chapel door. 2 more warehouses hit, he said. And Bianca talked. Dante stepped back, every line of him locking into place again. Matteo looked at us once and was gracious enough to pretend he was blind. She says Moretti is calling in all his people tonight, he added. Dante's face went still as winter water. War had arrived. War was quieter than I expected. Not in the headlines. Not in the city. There were sirens, yes, and fires in 2 Salvatore properties the papers called electrical failures, and 1 councilman who suddenly remembered a conference in Geneva. But inside the estate, war sounded like murmurs behind closed doors, shoes crossing marble at impossible hours, and the particular silence of armed men waiting for orders. It sounded like Matteo coughing blood into a white towel and saying he was fine. He had taken the round meant for Nico during the bakery ambush. The bullet missed his lung by what the doctor called a professional miracle, and Carlo called evidence God likes accountants. Matteo did not smile, but he squeezed Carlo's wrist when he thought nobody saw. That was how I knew how frightened we all were. 3 days passed in fragments. I translated recipe codes until my vision doubled. Dante slept less than anyone should, and still managed to appear in every room before trouble did. Morella fed the whole house like nourishment itself could hold walls upright. Carlo ran messages, cursed his own step count, and once whispered to me in the pantry, if I confess feelings to Morella during wartime, is that romantic or just medically unsound? Both, I said. He sighed deeply. That's what I feared. The second funny moment came an hour later when a delivery of emergency supplies arrived and 2 live geese tumbled out of the wrong produce crate, hissing like demons in feathers. Carlo climbed onto a marble bench with all the dignity of a collapsing empire. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have survived bullets. I will not die by bird. Morella caught 1 goose under each arm without changing expression. Men. Even Dante's mouth threatened life. Then, everything turned again. One of Moretti's bombs hit the rear bakery storage just before noon. Not enough to level the shop. Enough to burn the office and the last of my mother's paper records. Enough to blacken the awning with soot that looked like grief. I stood across the street behind a police barricade, smoke in my hair, and watched water turn the ash at my feet to paste. That was a message, Matteo said beside me, pale under the bandage at his side. Yes. Do you still think you can go back to what it was? I wanted to say yes so badly it felt childish. No words came. That night Dante put passports, cash, and a train schedule on the desk in my room. You leave at 6, he said. Morella will take you and your brother to Providence. Your aunt's house has already been secured. I looked at the documents. New names. A new life in thin paper form. And you? I asked. I stay. The answer did not surprise me. It hurt anyway. You're sending me away. I'm keeping you alive. His control made me angrier than shouting would have. You don't get to decide that alone, yes, he said. I do. I stood. The chair legs scraped hard against the floor. You don't get to turn me into luggage just because men want to punish you. Something flashed across his face, too quick to name, too painful to miss. This is not punishment. No? My bakery burned because of you. Matteo was shot because of you. Every room I walk into now has a man with a gun pretending not to watch me because of you. He absorbed every word without defending himself. That made them all worse. I know, he said. I went very still. Because that was the truth under all of it, wasn't it? Not that he was innocent. Not that I was. Just that he knew exactly what his world cost and still lived in it. Then why did you kiss me? I whispered. The question seemed to move through him like a blade he had already seen coming. He came closer, not close enough to touch. Because I forgot myself for 1 minute in a chapel, he said quietly. And because if I kissed you again now, you might stay for the wrong reason. I hated him a little for that wisdom. I hated myself more for hearing the care inside it. At dawn, I left. Morella sat beside me in the armored car to Grand Central, hands folded over a black leather bag. Nico stared out the window with the brittle stillness of somebody trying not to become a child in public. The station smelled of coffee, wet wool, and departure. Morella handed me the tickets. Once you board, do not get off. That was when Nico broke the final piece. I told Lena about the notebook, he said. I turned. What? His face had gone gray with shame. Not everything. Just that Dad might have hidden something. She said she knew a buyer who could clear the debt. Lena, his sweet, sharp-eyed girlfriend who worked nights at a florist in Bensonhurst. I suddenly saw every missed call, every strange bouquet at the bakery, every time she had asked too casually whether I still kept Dad's old things. She was Moretti, I said. He nodded once and nearly folded in half with it. I didn't know. The train announcement blurred around the edges. How long? Since before the club. I think she told them about the blue tin. He stared at the tracks. Soft, I never meant. I slapped him. Not hard. Hard enough. Morella looked away. My palm stung. So did everything else. The train doors opened. This was the exit. Real. Not drama. Not a threat. A clean line out of all of it. New name. New city. One brother. One life small enough to carry. Nico grabbed my wrist. Come with me. I looked at him. At the platform. At the reflection in the dark train windows of the woman I had been trying to remain. Careful. Ordinary, untouched if she moved correctly enough. Then I thought of Dante standing in gunfire, because I was slower than fear. Matteo bleeding onto bakery tile. My father hiding girls behind sugar measurements. The fact that leaving now would not return me to innocence. It would only ask me to pretend I still had it. I gave Nico the ticket. You go. His face emptied. Sophia, you go and stay gone long enough to become someone I can forgive. The words tore on the way out. Morella touched my elbow once, not to stop me, to acknowledge the cost. I stepped back from the train. Nico stared as if he had never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. When the doors closed, I stood on the platform and watched my old life leave without me. Then I turned and walked back toward the dark. I returned to the estate just after noon wearing yesterday's coat and a face that felt newly borrowed. Dante was in the war room with half his captains, one palm on the city map spread across the table. He looked up when I entered, and the entire room changed focus. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Then Dante crossed the floor. You were on a train. I got off. His hand came up as if to touch my face. Stopped. Fell back to his side. Almost. You should have gone. I know. Then why are you here? Because leaving had felt like lying with my whole body. Because I had finally seen the cost and stepped toward it anyway. Because he had kissed me in a chapel like restraint could save either of us forever. None of those were survivable answers. So I set my father's notebook on the map. Because I'm the only one who can read the rest of this quickly. And because Moretti isn't going to stop at city limits, something rough passed through his eyes. Pride. Fury. Fear. Maybe all three. Before he could answer, Carlo burst in carrying a garment bag and looking personally betrayed by existence. Morella sent your clean shirts, he said to Dante, then spotted me and nearly dropped everything. Oh good. The woman with catastrophic timing has returned. My blood pressure had just stabilized. That made one captain laugh despite himself. War room air cracked enough for breath. Carlo lowered his voice as he came near me. For the record, I voted that you should come back. Not because it's wise. Because it would have made the boss unbearable if you didn't. Dante gave him a look. Carlo clutched the garment bag to his chest. I'm leaving. He did not leave before adding, also, I told Morella if I survive this week, she has to have dinner with me somewhere that doesn't involve gunmen. She said she'd rather eat gravel. Which, frankly, is progress. He retreated. The room eased, then tightened again as business resumed. By dusk, we had 3 decoded locations. One belonged to an old sugar refinery in Long Island City, another to a decommissioned service warehouse near the piers, the third to a church basement in Queens that Moretti's crews used for cash transfers. Sugar, saffron, butter, girls, weapons, cash. My father had hidden an anatomy of rot in pastry terms. Dante sent teams to all 3. He sent me upstairs under guard. I made it to the second-floor gallery before the lights cut. Not storm this time. Deliberate. The emergency lamps failed a second later. A hand clamped over my mouth in the dark. I fought hard enough to hurt us both. Elbow, heel, teeth. The man cursed. Another voice, female, close to my ear. Stop moving, Sophia. He'll only tape your wrists tighter. Lena. For a moment I thought I had gone mad. Then the smell of her perfume reached me. White rose, cheap musk. I had hugged this woman in my bakery and let her hold boxes of cannoli. My stomach lurched. You're making this uglier than it had to be, she said. I bit the hand over my mouth. He struck me across the ribs. Pain flashed white. They dragged me down the servant stairs and through the side entrance before the generators recovered. A van door slammed. Plastic ties cut into my wrists. Someone pulled a hood over my head. I did not scream. That surprised even me. The van smelled like damp carpet, old gasoline, and fear. Lena sat across from me. I knew because she kept talking as though my silence insulted her. Nico was always too easy, she said. Boys with shame are basically unlocked windows. I swallowed blood where I had bitten my cheek. Did you ever like him? A pause. Sometimes, she said. That was the worst answer possible. When they finally pulled the hood off, I was in a cellar room beneath what looked like an abandoned confection warehouse. Rusted mixers. Sugar sacks gone hard with damp. One bare bulb overhead. Fitting. Enzo Moretti stood near the old loading door with his hands in his coat pockets. He was younger than I expected. Elegant. Beautiful in the way expensive knives were beautiful. Dark eyes. Unreadable mouth. Not a hair out of place. If Dante looked like still water over a drop, Enzo looked like silk stretched over wire. I'm sorry about the theatrics, he said. Your brother complicated a simpler arrangement. My heart stumbled. Nico is here? Enzo tilted his head toward the far corner. Nico sat on the floor, wrists tied, one eye swollen shut. I lurched toward him and got yanked back by the zip tie fixed to a steel ring behind me. Nico, he looked up, and the shame in his face hurt more than the bruises. I tried to fix it. Enzo smiled faintly. He did. That's what made it useful. Traitor revealed. Not from cruelty, from weakness. Sometimes that was worse. My voice came out thin. You used him. Yes. Enzo studied me with unnerving softness. The way your father tried to use everyone? I froze. He crouched in front of me. Paolo Bellini was a courier with conscience. A very annoying combination. He copied my routes, then tried to sell them to Salvatore Sr. after discovering what moved inside certain containers. Girls, I whispered. Yes. My stomach turned. He thought he could play savior at the last minute, Enzo said. Men always imagine morality makes them special. And my father? Died badly. Nico made a strangled sound. I closed my eyes once. Opened them again, because grief was a luxury the room would exploit. Enzo's voice stayed mild. Before he died, Paolo wrote one thing in the margin your Dante keeps pretending not to understand. Lucia. At that, something real moved in Enzo's face. Regret, maybe. Or the memory of having once been a person before he perfected being a system. She was never the target, he said. Her brother was. But that's war. Elevators fail. Girls panic. Men live long enough to become colder. Villain mirror. Not because he enjoyed cruelty, because he had made peace with what it bought him. A gunshot sounded somewhere above us. Then 3 more. Enzo rose, all grace gone flat. He found us faster than I hoped. Lena went pale. We should move. Enzo looked at me once. Not yet. He left us with 2 guards and the bare bulb shaking overhead. Nico started crying silently. I had never seen him do that in my life. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I stared at the rusted sugar kettle 10 feet away and thought, absurdly, of caramel temperatures. Outside the cellar door, men began to die. The first guard came close, because men like him always did. Not out of lust, out of confidence. It was a colder thing. He checked the ties at my wrists, smirked at the blood where plastic had cut skin, and told me in bored Italian that if I stayed quiet, I might live long enough to be traded. I nodded. Then I looked past him at the old sugar kettle again. Industrial syrup tanks had terrified me as a child. 1 wrong degree in sugar went from silk to weapon. It blistered, clung, marked. My father taught me that with a scar on his forearm and a rare hour of honesty. Respect the burn line, Sophia. Sweet can become damaged faster than people think. The second guard lit a cigarette. Cheap lighter. Wrong sound. Not Dante's. Still fire. When he crossed toward the kettle to tap ash into an old metal tray, I kicked the rusted pedal valve with both feet. Some miracle of neglect and leftover pressure screamed through the pipe. A spit of half-melted syrup and steam burst from the side seam straight across the guard's hand and throat. He shrieked. The first guard turned. I threw myself sideways, chair and all, into his knees. We hit the floor hard enough to crack my shoulder against concrete. His gun skidded under the stairs. Nico lunged from the corner, still tied, and slammed his bound wrists into the man's face with more desperation than skill. It was enough. I rolled, got the fallen lighter, and jammed the flame under the plastic binding at my wrists until it softened and burned my skin with it. Pain bit deep. I kept going. Above us, gunfire pounded through the warehouse. "Nico," I gasped, sawing his ties with the melted edge of mine. "Can you stand?" He nodded, crying and trying not to. Then, "Stand." The cellar door burst open. Lena stumbled in first, wild-eyed, pistol shaking. "Enzo's leaving." Her gaze landed on the guard writhing near the sugar line, then on me half free, and something shattered in her face. "Nico," she said. "Come on, we can still go." He stared at her as if love had finally taken off its borrowed skin. "You sold my sister." Lena swallowed. "I was trying to keep us alive." "No," I said. "You were trying to keep your options." She swung the gun toward me. Nico moved between us. The shot broke him open high in the shoulder and threw him back into the wall. I don't remember screaming. I remember the sound of it after. Then Dante was there. He crossed the room like the answer to a prayer nobody decent should have made. Gun raised. Face emptied of everything but outcome. Lena got one look at him and dropped the weapon. He did not shoot her. Matteo, pale and furious and very much not resting in any bed, appeared behind him and dragged her out with a grip like iron. Dante went to Nico first. That landed somewhere deep in me because I understood what it cost him to do the right thing in that order. Nico was alive. Bleeding hard, but alive. Carlo barreled down the stairs behind them carrying a medical bag and enough indignation to power a city. "I leave one woman alone for 15 minutes, he said, kneeling by Nico. And suddenly, we're all in a diabetic war dungeon. Even then, even with blood slicking the floor, something in me nearly laughed from sheer relief. Carlo looked at my wrists and swore softly. Morella is going to murder everybody except, somehow, me. Then Dante finally looked at me. There are moments when the body admits truths the mouth would ruin. This was one of them. He crossed the distance and pulled me into him so hard my feet left the ground. Not elegant. Not measured. His hand spread over the back of my head, fingers in my hair, checking bones, checking breath, checking existence. I held on just as badly. He smelled like smoke, rain, and the cold outside the warehouse doors. Under it, blood. Maybe his, maybe not. "You're hurt," he said against my temple. "Yes, where?" Later, he pulled back enough to see my face. His thumb brushed the corner of my mouth where blood had dried. His composure cracked by exactly 1 fraction. Almost. Then he sealed it again because that was what he did to survive. I thought you left, he said. I came back. I know. I wanted to tell him I had chosen it. Him. The whole impossible shape of it. The words crowded and failed. So I said the truest, smaller thing. Nico got shot. His eyes changed. He lives if I have to threaten the surgeon personally. The promise sounded like a sentence the universe had better obey. Matteo reappeared at the cellar door. Enzo's at the east loading bay. Dante's whole body went still. Go, I said before fear could make me selfish. He looked at me, at Nico, at the room full of consequences. Carlo stays with you. Carlo lifted a bloodied hand. Terrible assignment. I'm full of feelings. Then Dante was gone. I sat on the floor while Carlo packed Nico's wound and muttered dramatic abuse at anyone who breathed incorrectly. Matteo sent 2 men to carry my brother up. Lena sobbed somewhere unseen. The warehouse groaned with running feet and shouted orders. When I finally made it into the main production room, Dante stood at the broken window looking out over the river. Enzo was gone. On the concrete near the loading dock lay a folded page torn from my father's notebook. Matteo handed it to me. 1 line. Fresh ink. Ask him what his father bought with silence. I read it twice. Slow mystery. Now a blade in the open. Dante watched my face carefully enough to frighten me. He already knew what the note meant. Or part of it. Tell me, I said. Not here. His voice had gone distant. I folded the paper once. Then where? He looked out at the dark water, not at me. Somewhere it doesn't matter if what I say changes everything. At that moment, standing in a warehouse that smelled like burnt sugar and gunpowder, both of us knew one thing with merciless clarity. One of us might not survive what came next. He told me in the car. Not because there was time. Because there wasn't. The city moved past the armored windows in smeared bands of gold and wet black, while Matteo pressed a hand to his own side and Carlo, in the jump seat opposite us, kept muttering updates from the hospital about Nico's surgery and threatening to fight anyone who let him die before admitting the world was emotionally exhausting. Dante sat beside me with my father's torn note folded between his fingers. My father knew some of Moretti's shipping was dirty, he said. The words were so plain they took a second to become devastating. He didn't know all of it. Not at first. But he knew enough. Enough to look away while profits stayed clean on paper. Rain tapped the glass. I stared at him. And Lucia? His jaw tightened. Enzo wanted leverage. A warning. My father kept telling himself war could be managed if certain lines weren't looked at too closely. He looked at the note once, then out at the city. Silence bought him money, influence, time, and it bought him your sister's death, yes. No defense, no gentling. Just truth laid down where it hurt. I understood then why Dante's grief had always felt sharpened by disgust. It wasn't just loss. It was inheritance. Carlo cleared his throat softly from the jump seat and for once offered no joke. How do we stop him? I asked. Dante turned the note over. On the back, in my father's old code, was one more shipment entry. Butter, saffron, sugar, cash, weapons, girls. Final transfer. Pier 8. Midnight. He's consolidating, Matteo said, taking what he can and burning the rest. I traced the dock notation. No. Look at the temperatures. My pulse picked up. These are wrong. Dad only used 320 for the south refrigeration line. Pier 8 is a feint. He means the old cold storage terminal under Pier 6. Dante looked at me. Something like pride flashed through the exhaustion in his eyes. Then we go to Pier 6, he said. The terminal smelled of salt water, diesel, and old metal. The sort of place where sound carried badly and intentions carried well. Men took positions in silence. Matteo directed entries with the cold precision of a man stitched together by discipline and painkillers. Carlo, somehow armed and still offended by everyone's cardio demands, escorted 2 girls found locked in a side trailer back to the ambulance line with such gentleness it made my throat close. You see? He told one in a voice far softer than I had ever heard from him. You survived this and I'm making you proper food. Nothing steamed. Today is not for steamed chicken. Then he looked at me over her head, fear plain on his face for the first time. "Stay behind cover, Sophia," I nodded. I lied. The first explosion came from the western crates. A diversion. Men scattered. Gunfire opened in brutal stutters. Dante moved through it with that same terrible efficiency I had seen in the bakery. Only now I knew what it cost him, and that made it worse. Enzo emerged near the refrigeration doors with 2 bodyguards and one hand on the arm of a teenage girl he was using as shield. Everything inside me iced over. Dante stopped 10 feet away, gun low but ready. "Let her go," he said. Enzo smiled as if they were discussing wine. "You sound like your father. He always mistook requests for leverage. You killed children to protect roots. I moved product in a system your family helped build." His gaze cut to me. "Did he tell you that part, pastry girl?" Dante did not look away from him. "Let her go." The girl sobbed. The bodyguards shifted. I saw the refrigeration panel on the wall behind them. Old model. My father used to curse the exact latch type in summer deliveries, because once the emergency purge engaged, the vapor release hit hard enough to blind anyone standing too close for several seconds. I moved before I fully decided to. Not toward Dante. Sideways. Behind stacked produce crates. Through freezing mist leaking from the line, my palm found the red purge lever. Matteo saw me first. His eyes widened a fraction. He did not shout. Bless him for that. Enzo's attention stayed on Dante. "Do you know what the difference is between us?" he asked. "Yes," Dante said. "No. You still think your remorse means you're not made of the same steel?" I pulled the lever. A roaring blast of white vapor exploded from the sideline, slamming into Enzo and both bodyguards. The girl dropped instinctively. Dante fired once, then again. One guard went down. Matteo took the second from the catwalk. Enzo staggered half-blind toward the dock edge, one hand clawing for balance. Dante crossed the distance. No speech, no flourish, just a man walking toward the shape of what he might become if he let grief justify anything. Enzo looked up through the freezing cloud and laughed once, blood at his mouth. "Do it, then. Become honest." Dante stopped within arm's reach. I could not hear the next words. Maybe there were none. Maybe that was the point. Enzo reached for the gun at his ankle. Dante shot him through the chest. The sound vanished into the river wind. For a moment, Enzo remained standing, surprise moving slowly across his face like light over dark glass. Then, he tipped backward off the loading lip and was gone into black water below. No one cheered. Victory never sounds like that. The girls were taken out wrapped in blankets. 2 of Dante's men did not rise. Matteo leaned against a crate until a medic swore at him into submission. Carlo sat on an ammo case with blood on his shirt that turned out, thank God, not to be his, and put both hands over his face for exactly 10 seconds before getting up to help load stretchers. I stood near the river while cold mist settled on my coat. Dante came to me last. His hands were clean. That was somehow the worst part. "It's over," he said. I looked at him, at the man who had won and lost in the same breath. Then I put my father's notebook into his hands. "Burn the roots," I said. "All of them. Whatever money dies with them, let it die." He held my gaze a long time. Then he nodded once. "It is over." War did not end in one night. It ended in paperwork, funerals, testimony too quiet for television, and the gradual disappearance of certain men from certain tables. It ended in Dante shutting down 3 shipping fronts that had made his family rich for decades. It ended in his uncle Vittorio resigning himself into exile, before Dante could decide whether blood outweighed contempt. It ended in Matteo learning how to sit down without being ordered, and in Carlo pretending he was not crying at the memorial mass because incense triggered his allergies. It ended, mostly in survival. Nico lived. That sentence deserved its own church bell. The bullet missed bone by mercy or incompetence. He woke angry, ashamed, and alive. I visited him every day in the private recovery wing Dante's money made possible, and made him say Lena's name out loud each time so memory would never let him soften what she had done. "I know," he told me once. eyes on the blanket. You don't have to keep teaching me, yes, I said. I do. Forgiveness, I learned, was not the opposite of consequence. 3 weeks after Pier 6, I was back in a kitchen. Not my old bakery. That building still smelled too much like smoke. This was a new space Dante had bought under another name on a quiet corner in Brooklyn Heights. Brick walls. Deep windows. A copper espresso machine Carlo worshipped on sight. Enough room for Morella to inspect everything and call most of it impractical. I was tempering chocolate when Dante walked in. He still wore dark suits. Men still lowered their voices around him. The world outside him had not become safe. But he looked different in rooms with daylight. Less like a threat waiting. More like a man learning where to put his hands when he did not need to make everyone else afraid. He stopped by the counter and watched me drag the spatula through the glossy chocolate. You're overworking it, he said. I looked up sharply. Since when do you know chocolate? Since Matteo married a woman from Turin who considered ignorance a defect, that startled a laugh out of me. You're impossible, so I'm told. The silence after that was not empty. It had become one of our ways of speaking. He set something small on the counter beside my elbow. A shallow ceramic dish, white with a blue rim. Handmade. Slightly uneven. For your rings? I asked before thinking. His mouth changed. Not quite a smile. Close enough to feel like sun through a high window. If you say yes, everything in me went still. There was no kneeling. No restaurant. No violins hired to force magic where history had already done the work. Just Dante and my half-finished kitchen while the chocolate shone between us and the smell of coffee drifted from the front room. I don't know how to ask in a way that sounds easy, he said. Nothing about us has been easy. My throat tightened. I can offer you honesty, he went on. A dangerous name. A life that won't pretend darkness isn't part of the structure. I can offer you every decision before it becomes yours, not after. And what I can't give anyone else. He stopped, once, as if saying it directly cost him more than violence ever had. You can have all of me. He finished. There it was. No flourish. Just wait. I put the spatula down because my hand had started to shake. Dante. If the answer is no, say it cleanly, it's not no. The breath that left him was so quiet I nearly missed it. I wiped my palms on my apron. I'm not saying yes because you saved me, or because I'm afraid to imagine anything else. I know. I'm saying yes because I've seen what you do when nobody is watching, and when everybody is. Because you stop when you want to keep going, because you tell the truth in pieces but they're real pieces. My voice broke a little. Because somehow I feel safest with the man who should frighten me most. Something in his face nearly undid me. I laughed through sudden tears. And because if I don't marry you, Carlo will turn this into a 6-month emotional hostage situation. From the doorway, Carlo slapped a hand over his heart. I'm touched and insulted. We both turned. He leaned against the frame, holding 2 espresso cups and grinning like a menace. Behind him, Morella stood with arms crossed and absolutely no interest in pretending she had not been eavesdropping. Well, Carlo demanded. My meal prep schedule depends on whether we're having a wedding. Yes, I said. Carlo shouted loud enough to frighten the espresso machine. Morella closed her eyes for 1 patient second, then kissed my cheek as she passed and said, About time. Dante stepped closer only after the others retreated. He did not pull me into him. He gave me the choice in the space between us. I took it. My hand slid up his chest to the lapels of his coat. He touched my face with such care it felt like an answer to every rough thing we had survived. Little saint, he murmured. There was no coldness left in it now. Only home. Later, after Carlo spent 25 minutes arguing that wedding cake tastings counted as tactical operations, and Morella told him if he flirted with her over fondant she would bury him under the floor, Dante lit the stove pilot with his silver lighter. Double click. The sound no longer made the room go still in fear. It made me look up smiling. That, more than the ring he slid onto my finger an hour later, was when I understood how much had changed. 8 months later, the bakery opened before dawn. Not because customers demanded it, because I liked the hour when the city still belonged to delivery trucks, old women with shopping carts, and men coming home from sins they would deny by breakfast. Bellini and Saint sat on a corner in Brooklyn Heights with pale blue trim, warm brass lights, and a back kitchen that smelled perpetually of butter, coffee, and the citrus peel I could never seem to stop buying in bulk. Carlo claimed the name was manipulative branding. Dante claimed Carlo was jealous no one had ever named a pastry after him. Carlo replied that if we made something low-carb and devastatingly handsome, he'd consider it. Morella only sighed and ironed his Sunday shirts anyway. That was their entire love story until proven otherwise. Nico worked the front 3 mornings a week while finishing classes upstate. He moved more carefully now. So did I around him. Some hurts did not vanish because they were forgiven. They simply learned manners. Sometimes I caught him looking at the scar on his shoulder with a face too old for 20, and I wondered if loving someone meant accepting that part of them would always remain at the train platform where you almost left each other forever. That was the unresolved thread, I suppose. Not whether we survived. We had. Whether survival ever paid back what it borrowed from us. I still didn't know. The winter power flickered at 6:15. Old building. Old wiring. The front room dimmed once, then surrendered, leaving the ovens on backup and the display case in shadow. I stood on a stool near the pastry shelves trying to relight the row of thick cream candles we kept for mornings like this. The matchbox was missing, because Carlo had reorganized the drawer according to what he called combat intuition, which meant nothing to anyone but him. The kitchen door opened behind me. I didn't turn. I knew the shape of his silence now. A second later came the sound. Double click. The silver flare of Dante's St. Michael lighter brightened the dark. He stepped beside me in shirt sleeves and winter wool, suit jacket unbuttoned, hair still damp from the weather outside. Snow had begun sometime before dawn, tiny white grains catching in the shoulders of his coat. He smelled like cold air and cedar, and the life I had chosen with open eyes. "Careful," he said. "I'm on a stool, not a cliff. With you, the distinction blurs." I smiled despite myself. He lifted the lighter to the first candle. Flame caught, then the second, then the third. Gold spread through the front room in soft circles, touching glass cases, brass handles, and the ring on my hand. Same gesture as the first night. Nothing like it. I stepped down from the stool. As I did, Dante reached automatically to steady my waist. That was when I saw the split skin over his knuckle. A stupid little cut, probably from helping Nico drag in flour sacks because he still did things with his hands when too much thinking crowded him. I took his wrist without hesitation. He went still. The lighter flame trembled once between us. "It's bleeding," I said. There it was again. The thing from Chapter 1. No armed men this time. No locked corridor. No fear bigger than us in the room. Just my hand on his and his whole attention turning toward that old impossible reflex in me. He looked at my fingers around his wrist, then at my face. For 1 second, Dante Salvatore seemed as ruined by tenderness as any man had ever been by war. "You still do that," he said quietly. "What?" "See the wound first." I swallowed. "Should I stop?" His gaze held mine. "Never." I took him to the sink, cleaned the cut, and wrapped a strip of white cloth around his hand while the candles burned and snow gathered beyond the windows. Through the glass, the city went on being itself, beautiful, indifferent, dangerous in old familiar ways. Inside, coffee hissed to life. Somewhere in the back room, Carlo sneezed like a cannon and accused the cinnamon of conspiring against his macros. Morella told him if he used the word macros before sunrise again, she would poison only his protein powder. Ordinary. The most radical thing in the world. When I tied off the bandage, Dante leaned down and touched his forehead to mine. No rush. No almost. Just the earned weight of staying. "Little saint," he murmured. "Warm. Entirely warm." I closed my eyes for a second and let myself feel everything at once. The grief that had not vanished. The life that had still come after it. the man in front of me who carried darkness like structure and had still learned gentleness without mistaking it for weakness. We opened at 7. By 8, the line stretched to the door. Nico burned one batch of espresso and blamed the grinder. Carlo flirted shamelessly with Morella over biscotti inventory until she finally, magnificently, agreed to dinner if he promised not to discuss protein percentages for 1 full hour. He looked so stunned I nearly dropped a tray. Dante stood at the register for 10 blessedly chaotic minutes, while 3 neighborhood women pretended not to recognize the most dangerous man in the borough, and then tipped him in exact change. When the rush slowed, he found me in the back by the orange cakes. He did not say much. He rarely had to. He just lifted my hand, kissed the inside of my wrist where the old zip-tie burn had faded to a pale line, and looked around the bakery we had built out of ash, debt, shame, and stubbornness. A life, then. Not clean. Not innocent. Real. Sometimes I still wondered what my father would think if he saw me here, married to a man his secrets had nearly destroyed. Sometimes I wondered whether love could ever be separate from what it cost the people standing nearest to its fire. I don't know if there's an answer that doesn't bruise. I only know this. The first time I saw Dante Salvatore bleed, I reached for the wound because I could not bear not to. The last time, I did it because his hand was mine to care for, and he had finally learned to let it be. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the candles held.